And we also have a series of shorts, clips from the documentary they're put out there. And they have several 100,000 views of our short clips that are out there on Instagram and other places in social media. And so we're very pleased with this, that we're making some progress in educating people about what the Fed does and who benefits from it.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, we've got person from our favorite Institute of Higher Learning, and that is the Mises Institute, Mises University, Mises.org, MISES.org. Go there now. Tom DiLorenzo is with us. We're talking about a documentary put out by the Mises Institute called Playing with Fire. And Tom, you were telling me about a pre-call. I've got to go see it. You said it's gotten over 600,000 views in a very short period of time.
Yeah, we produced a 38-minute documentary. It features Ron Paul, Jim Grant, myself, and a number of other people trying to explain in plain English about what the Fed is and what the Fed does, and one of the reasons why we think it's real necessary is I told you the little story about how when Tucker Carlson interviewed Ron Paul on his podcast several months ago, Tucker recalled the story of when Ron was running for the Republican nomination. He had a speech to deliver at Michigan State University, and the students there, hundreds of students, began spontaneously chanting, "End the Fed, end the Fed." And and Ron ended up writing a whole book called End the Fed. But that wasn't organized by his campaign or anybody else. The students had just listened to some of his speeches, and they did that. And Tucker Carlson's response was to say, well, I was a professional journalist at the time, and I was covering that, and I didn't know anything about the Fed, and I'm paid to know at least something.
Yeah, some kind of superficial knowledge. It just so surprises me because Tucker Carlson, his father was in the deep state, was part of the deep state by his own admission, and Voice of America, I think he was in charge of, and he'd been intimately involved, even speculation about being with a certain three-letter agency that we all know and love, Tom. So it just shocks me that he could be that ignorant on the topic. But I guess if you're not concentrating on something, you're not focusing on it, then it's understandable you wouldn't know anything.
If you weren't focusing on the Fed, you wouldn't understand anything about it. So that's the purpose of our documentary, Playing with Fire, which you can look at on YouTube, or you can go to our website, Mises.org/fire, and you'll find it. And it's gotten over almost 600,000 views in 5 months. And we also have a series of shorts, clips from the documentary they're put out there, and they have several 100,000 views of our short clips that are out there on Instagram and other places in social media. And so we're very pleased with this, that we're making some progress in educating people about what the Fed does and who benefits from it.
Yeah, and there certainly are a lot of people benefiting from it, for sure. We could kind of tie this into what's happening with Doge right now, the expose of frivolous, corrupt, fraudulent, criminal government spending. It's all tied together to the Fed, right? Without the Fed, they wouldn't be able to do this.
Oh, right. The Fed is the state's legalized counterfeiting machine, and there's no way around it. And so, yeah, when Americans see all this absurd waste of trillions of dollars that they're discovering, it's going to be in the trillions, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
it is all made possible by the Fed, because you tell people, for example, okay, we're going to give the dictator of Ukraine another $50 billion, but we're going to have to send each tax-paying family, working family, a bill for $10,000 tax bill, you'd have a lot less support for the war in Ukraine, and you'd see a lot fewer Ukrainian bumper stickers in your town. But if the Fed can just print up the money, it disguises the true cost of government, and it's not just foreign policy; it's everything. And that's what it's all built on funny money, which is the Fed. And so if we were to just end the ability of the Fed to monetize the debt, the Fed is out there, literally counterfeits money, does it electronically these days, and it purchases the government debt, short-term debt. And that's called monetizing the debt. And that didn't come into existence until the 1930s. The Fed was created in 1913, but that law could be repealed. And that would instantly go a great deal, a long way toward eliminating the ability of the Fed to create price inflation and never-ending boom and bust cycles that we have in every decade. We have some sort of crisis caused by the Fed, and then the Fed comes back and says, "Oh, we're gonna solve the crisis that we created by doing more of the same thing."
So I'm gonna run something by you here. The National Cryptocurrency Reserve, or Bitcoin Reserve. Right now, it's like we don't know how much exactly because a lot's been confiscated, some's been stolen, but there could be as many as 500,000 Bitcoins there, maybe 1 million. Maybe if a certain 3-letter alphabet agency created it, there could be millions there. So what if the actual plan here is to pump up Bitcoin to $10 million a coin, have $50 trillion worth of Bitcoin in the reserve, and just do a debt swap? You no longer have U.S. government debt. You've got Bitcoin. Congratulations. Enjoy your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yes, it's. I think it's feasible. You can think of that happening, but I think another thing I think that did happen once Trump announced this, there are a lot of people who made a killing in Bitcoin, another killing as far as that goes. But I doubt that will happen. It's feasible, but I doubt that something like that is going to happen. But I'm worried that the government is getting involved at all in Bitcoin. The whole idea was to be able to engage in transactions without the government constantly snooping and threatening and holding you hostage. And so here comes Trump putting the government involved with Bitcoin. And we'll see what happens, but I just don't, in a visceral sense, I don't like the idea of the government getting involved with so much with Bitcoin.
But really, couldn't you see them doing this?
Yeah, they've done wilder things. But
and it's like, that's how you get something out of nothing. Everybody gets their money. Nobody cares. Everybody's happy, right?
Yeah, and we can go on with business as usual.
Yeah. I mean, everybody gets paid, right? Isn't that what it's about in the end?
Yeah.
And then I don't know what happens to Bitcoin after it, but it could be the mother of all pump and dumps, right? I actually did a video about that myself.
Yeah.
Just speculating on what would happen. It seems like the kind of thing Trump would pull, Yeah,
Trump and Elon Musk.
Yeah, it's like, hey, there is no way to pay off the debt otherwise, is there?
No, historically, all governments have done was, well, you can repudiate it. You can just tell the Chinese, sorry, you're not going to get, you'll never get your money back from all those bonds you bought. And inflation slowly gets rid of the national debt, but that's just like drops in the ocean as far as that goes.
Yeah, this is going to be fun to watch. I think there's an ulterior motive here, and maybe it's the only way that it can be done. I'm not going to speculate, but getting back to the documentary, because it really does tie into it, the arsonist at play here is the Federal Reserve. They start a fire, and then like we were talking about, they put it out with gasoline, and it erupts into an inferno, and the next thing you know, you got Los Angeles burning. So if the Fed wasn't writing the checks, they're the ultimate enabler. It's like, hey, don't blame us. all we do is print money and control the money supply and try to ensure stable prices and full employment. And also their latest function is to never allow the stock market to go down. But without them, none of this, like we were talking about, would be possible, would it?
Yeah, no, it wouldn't. And all these things, any economics student who takes Econ 101 in college, one of the first weeks of the semester, you learn about the bad effects of price controls. And here's the Fed constantly trying to manipulate interest rates, and driving them down to zero one year and then doing the opposite the next year, and that's a form of price control. And then you have hundreds of Fed economists who rationalize this, who defend this practice. It really is a central planning organization, and the Fed does more than monetary policy. It is involved in one of its own publications. It's called the Structure and Functions of the Federal Reserve System, and it lists hundreds of different types of regulations that the Fed enforces in every conceivable type of financial transaction. So it does a lot more than just monetary policy. For example, one simple example, in the 1970s, there was a law passed that created called the Community Reinvestment Act.
Oh.
This is the law that sort of pressures banks and mortgage lenders to make loans basically based on race and income, and even if and they've made billions of loans to unqualified borrowers by putting more or less a quota system on lending, on mortgage lending, and that's just one of the things that the Fed enforces, and that was a part of the crash of '08, of course, with a lot of the bad loans. I'm not saying it was the main cause. The Fed's bubble that it created was the main cause, but that contributed to it. And there are dozens of other laws and regulations like that makes the Fed sort of a grand central planning agency, because it controls more than just the money supply.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And we know how well central planning works. We all were looking up to the Chinese, how wonderful their experiment was going. And then a funny thing happened on the way to global dominance. Everything blew up.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, back in the 1980s, I remember when Japan was touting what they called its industrial policy, which was, heavy planning of its industry. And they did things like they only wanted one national car. And at one point in Japan in the post-World War II era. And then, of course, the Japanese economy went in the tank for several decades, really, after that. And so they quit bragging about their version of central planning. And it's incredible, by the way, if you study American economic history in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and even past that, all the praise that American statesmen, so-called self-described statesmen, gave for Soviet central planning. Even Paul Samuelson, a famous textbook author from MIT, whose book dominated the economics textbook market for 40 years, beginning in 1948, he predicted in his 1988 edition that the Soviet economy by the year 2000 would be bigger than the U.S. economy. So, of course, a couple of years later, the Soviet economy essentially disappeared altogether. And so here we are with the Fed, is sort of the last vestige of early 20th century central planning, and it needs to go.
Yes, certainly does need to go. We know that's for sure, but how it will go, how they'll get rid of it, that's going to be the interesting thing. So, Tom, we find you over at Mises.org, correct?
That's right. That's our website. You can get a great economic education for free. And I just happen to have this little book by Friedrich Hayek on my desk called Choice in Currency, a Way to Stop Inflation. And it's one way to start getting rid of the Fed and allowing competing currencies. And, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is one thing. But, currencies backed by gold or silver or other precious metals is another way to go. And I think that's what has to happen in the future. The whole world relied on gold-based money for thousands of years before governments took over the money. And that's the direction I think our country needs to head into.
Agreed, for sure. Preaching to the converted here, Tom. Appreciate you coming on as always. We'll talk to you again soon. We'll have a link in the show notes. This interview on Financial Survival Network with the link to the documentary and, of course, to Mises.org and your bio. Appreciate you coming on. We'll talk to you again soon, Tom. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.